Hey, what's up, geographers? Coach Fishbein here. We're back with another video. We're going to be talking about Unit 5 of AP Human Geography today, talking all about agriculture and rural land use. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right. First thing we got to know is that what we grow, what we're producing as humans who are using agriculture is very highly dependent on the physical environment, on the climate, on latitude, how much sunlight places get. And that's why you see some places like the Mediterranean climate, like where I'm at in San Diego, this is going to be a climate where you're able to grow things like olives and grapes, whereas other places of the world are a little bit more tropical and more amenable to growing things like banana, coffee beans, lots of other fruits and vegetables. Okay, so geography has a very intense role on what we're able to produce. Okay. Now, as we go through several types of agriculture in this unit, two main ideas that I'm going to need you to keep in mind are these ideas of subsistence agriculture and commercial agriculture. All right. If we're talking about subsistence agriculture, we're talking about farmers who are only growing and producing a little bit of food, and they're basically eating or consuming all of that themselves, right? They might sell a little bit in order to trade for things they need, but most of what they produce is for their own consumption. This is very different than what we call commercial agriculture, okay? Farmers who are engaged in commercial agriculture, they want to make a profit. They want to sell things. They want to make some money. So that's what you see here in like this big chicken silo, okay? All right. Now, there's two other like ideas that I'm going to need you to keep in your mind, and those are intensive agriculture and extensive agriculture. Intensive agriculture, as you see here, is agriculture in which farmers expend a great deal of effort to produce as much yield as possible from an area of land. Okay. Since land is expensive, it's typically commercial farmers who are engaging in intensive agriculture. They don't want to spend a lot of money on land that they don't need, so they're going to invest instead in inputs like fertilizers, pesticides, to try to get the most out of that land as possible. Okay. Now, what the College Board wants you all to know is 9 different types of agriculture, 5 of which fall in this umbrella of intensive agriculture. So we got plantation agriculture here. Those are like your coffee farmers, tobacco, cotton, market gardening, which is what I think of with market gardening is selling things like at a farmer's market. So I got some strawberries right here, but other fruits and vegetables would fit in market gardening. Mixed crop and livestock is when you're producing both animals and crops. Dairying, that's where we get all our milk and cheese from and other dairy products. And then we got Mediterranean agriculture right here, where we're producing grapes, olives, things like that. Okay. Now, I also mentioned extensive agriculture. In extensive agriculture, this is agriculture characterized by relatively few inputs and investment in labor and capital, typically resulting in less output. We're going to be able to make less stuff if we're farming extensively, but we're typically going to have a larger land area to work with. Okay. There's 4 types of agriculture that fit under this umbrella. We've got shifting cultivation. And in this case, this is typically subsistence farmers who are kind of going from place to place, shifting where they're cultivating, sometimes cutting down the trees and maybe even slashing and burning an area to try to replenish the nutrients in the soil. We also have pastoral nomadism, where farmers are following around their animals and just trying to find fields so their animals can graze and fertilize those fields. And once those have been grazed over, they'll leave and find another field and then eventually come back. We have ranching, which you see in a lot of the American Southwest, amongst a few other places. And then we've got grain agriculture as well, where we're producing corn and wheat and crops like that. All right. Next, we've got agricultural regions. All right. Now, I know this isn't you're not going to be able to really pause and zoom in on the key over here, but I would encourage you to find a copy of this map somewhere on the internet, and you really want to try to memorize this map as much as you can. Okay. Now, I know it's probably tough to memorize a map, but what you'll see on this map is that a lot of these different agricultural regions, which are the same ones as you see on the 2 previous slides, they're based on latitude. Okay. Like you can see, let's use the Mediterranean example that I mentioned earlier that we see here in Southern California. That's like this light purple color that you'll see around the Mediterranean Sea, but you'll also see it here in California, on the west coast of the United States, down on the west coast of Chile, in South America, and even a little bit down here on the west coast of Australia. All those places are at the same latitude for the most part. They are like an equal distance away from the equator. They're getting consistent amounts of sunlight, and it's a temperate climate. Okay. And that really plays a large role in what we're able to grow. So if you look at this map in this way, seeing the consistencies in latitude, then you should be able to kind of memorize this map. Okay. Now, one more thing, monoculture. We got to know that intensive agriculture is typically an example of monoculture, or and with grain agriculture as well. And that's where we're growing one thing, right? I make this example. Would you be very healthy if you only ate apples? Probably not, right? You want to mix it up. Well, soil's the same way. Soil doesn't stay healthy if you're just growing one crop on it, like in monoculture or in monocropping. So we want to try to mix it up, but these intensive agriculture firms where they're trying to make as much money as possible, they don't really do that. So they have to take shortcuts and use fertilizer and pesticides to replenish the soil, which is not really good for the long-term health of the soil. All right. Sorry, we jumped the gun a little bit there, but here we go with rural settlement patterns. Okay. We got 3 different types that we got to know. This first one is called clustered. You see the homes for the farmers in this region, they're all clustered together. And then during the day, as they're working in the fields, they'll go out and get to their farms out there. Okay, you can see the fields beyond in the landscape in this picture. Next type is a dispersed rural settlement pattern. Okay. In this pattern, the farmers are just kind of dispersed. There's not really a pattern. They probably live closest to their fields, but they're not all clustered together or not along a road or a river. Right? That's different than linear rural settlements, which are typically along a road or a river. I like this photo because you can see that these homes are along both of those, and then you can see their fields are over here. Okay. Next, let's go over some rural survey methods. First one we got is meets and bounds. What they used to do to survey the land and delineate people's properties is they would just say, all right, we're going to draw a line from this big tree to that big tree, down to that part of the river and over to those bushes over there. That's your property. And you get these irregular shapes and patterns, which are called meets and bounds. Okay. That's different than township and range, where they're almost like using lines of latitude and longitude to divide up the property. And you get this nice, very visually appealing grid-like pattern, which you can see here. And then the last one is long lots. On long lots, you really want to give everybody access to the river. So the lots are going to be very long, right? Giving everybody a little bit of the river so that people can put their crops on boats over there and transport them throughout the landscape. All right. We're going to do a little bit of history in this part of the human geography course. We're going to talk about some different agricultural revolutions that have occurred through the last 10,000 years or so of human history. The first of which is called the Neolithic Revolution. Sometimes you'll see this called the first agricultural revolution. They mean the same thing. Okay. Now, this is a kind of a mind-blowing development in human history, if you ask me, right? Before the Neolithic Revolution, everybody who lived on Earth had one job. Everybody had the same job, and that was hunting and gathering food, right? You couldn't have a teacher, or you couldn't have an artist, or you couldn't have a politician, or a doctor, or an author, because acquiring food was such a big task that everybody had to participate in doing that, okay? The Neolithic Revolution changed all that because humans finally figured out, hey, if we put these seeds in the soil, give them a little bit of attention, give them a little bit of water, maybe some fertilizer, they're going to grow into predictable foods that we can eat, right? And that creates what we call a food surplus. That food surplus makes it that so that I can be a teacher, so that other people around the country can be lawyers, doctors, nurses, professional athletes, right? They're going to now trade their labor to buy the food that they need, as opposed to working hard to make the food themselves, okay? So the Neolithic Revolution, or the first agricultural revolution, changes everything. This rise of agriculture really allows human civilization to take off, all right? In this time, we also have some agricultural hearths, all right, where we're starting to initially see crops kind of come about across the planet, okay? I don't think you could probably memorize this. I think that would be pretty tough. So just try to find a map is my recommendation. One like this one or another one on the internet, and see what you can remember. Okay. Now, in addition to remembering where crops are from, I think remembering where animals are from is a little bit easier. Okay. There's a really great video from one of my favorite YouTubers called CGP Gray, and he talks about animal hearths in this video. And he mentions how in the Western Hemisphere, there's not very many animals, and especially like beasts of burden or animals that we eat that were available initially in the Western Hemisphere. Just turkeys, llamas, and guinea pigs, which are not nearly as useful as dogs, cows, pigs, goats, horses. So this played a really big role in human history. I'd encourage you to go find this video if you would like to see the whole thing. But for this class, I would think knowing that there's a lot more animal hearths in the Eastern Hemisphere than in the Western Hemisphere is pretty important for you to know. Okay? All right. Now, as we start to head through human history, we're going to fast forward from 10,000 years ago to about 500 years ago or so. We get the Columbian Exchange, named after Christopher Columbus, of course. Okay? Not that he facilitated all this, but Christopher Columbus gets named after, a lot of stuff gets named after him, right? Either fairly or unfairly. Okay. Now, the Columbian Exchange refers to the first real exchange of these crops throughout the two hemispheres. All right. A really great example is tomatoes, right? Pizza. If you think pizza, you're probably thinking Italy. That's what I always think of. But pizza wasn't even possible in Italy until about 500 years ago because tomatoes are a Western Hemisphere food. All right. So this Columbian Exchange really revolutionizes food and how humans around the planet are able to eat now that they're able to acquire foods from faraway places. Okay. We get into the second agricultural revolution now in the last 300-400 years, where we're starting to create more tools that makes our agriculture more efficient. Seed drill, Jethro tull, lots of inventions that you can read about. Okay. Next, let's get into the third agricultural revolution, which occurred in the 19th, 20th century, and might even still be going today, where we're starting to mechanize more and more, right? We're starting to use like these tractors on wheels. We're starting to use airplanes to fertilize our crops. And we're even starting to get into what we call the green revolution, where we're using biotechnology to genetically modify our food and make it more resistant, make it more resistant to drought, make it more durable, make it more stay redder if it's a tomato or an apple, stay yellower if it's a banana. Really just make it more appealing and more likely to be bought if you're a consumer. Okay. Now, another thing that you should probably know is that because of intensive agriculture, because of commercial agriculture, because of things like the Green Revolution and the Third Agricultural Revolution and mechanization, we're seeing a lot more money in farming. And we're seeing a lot more corporate control of farming, right? So this is probably what you're thinking of when you think of cows and where our milk comes from. But in reality, a lot of our factory farms create their milk in places like this, right? So understanding that we're seeing a decline in small family farms and a rise in large corporate farms is something that you're going to need to know. All right, let's talk about subsidies. That's this word down here. Sorry, got covered by the menu right there. But subsidies in the United States, we subsidize the big agribusinesses, right? With something like the Farm Bill. Who gets left out? The small family farms, all right? Places like Monsanto, Tyson, Smithfield, they're the ones that are getting all the money from the government, whereas the small little farmer down the street that you see at the farmer market, he's probably or she's probably getting left out, okay? And as a result, you see these corporations. Look at all these logos around the edge of this infographic, all these different food brands that you would see in the grocery store. They're really owned by just a small handful of companies, right? I don't know if you realize that your Kentucky Fried Chicken and your Taco Bell and your Tostitos and your Quaker cereal, they're all made by Pepsi, the soft drink guys. So this is another effect of the corporatization of agriculture over the last 100 years or so. Okay. Now, how do they make all that work? They need commodity chains, right? They need these chains where the farmers are getting inputs from the input companies. They're putting it in the ground and growing the product. They sell it off to a trading and processing company who are going to sell it off to a food company. And then it'll finally get to the retailers like an Albertsons or a Vons or a Ralph's here in San Diego. And then that's where you and me are going to go walk in with our masks on, hopefully, to go buy it off the shelf. Okay. Some of these countries, the ones that you can see in the blue, green, and red, are what we call commodity dependent, right? A lot of their economies are dependent on exporting one thing a lot of the times. And this is a pretty precarious situation. You'll see mostly developing countries are able to diversify their exports so they're not reliant on one crop like coffee or something like that with Brazil, Argentina, and other South American countries. What happens if because of climate change, it's getting more difficult to grow coffee? What's going to happen to these economies if they can't grow coffee anymore? That's going to be a kind of a tough issue that we're going to see here in the 21st century. All right. I made a video. Here we go. A video within a video. All right. Let's talk about bid rent theory. Okay. Now, we have 4 different types of farmer in this video. Okay. Depending on a lot of factors, they're going to choose to either be close to the market or far away from the market. So you see this blue group right here. Maybe they are growing dairy. Maybe they really need to pump out this milk and get it to the market fast before it spoils. So they're going to pay more to be closer to the market. Whereas you might be a group like in the red, where you don't really need to be too close to the market. Maybe you're growing, maybe you're trading livestock, right? You're growing cows to cut into beef, you're growing pigs to cut into pork. Those animals can walk to the market themselves for free, right? So, but they do need a lot of space to graze. So you're going to pay less to get more land, and you're going to be further away from the market, okay? So we got these 4 different groups. The group that's the closest will pay the most in rent. The groups that's the furthest away will pay the least. And then we can expand it down from there to get what we call the von Thunen model. Okay. So let's go to the next slide where we can see the combination of both the bid rent theory over here on the left and the von Thunen model. All right. We talked about the dairyers right there closest to the market. The next ring out, we're going to see forests. Remember, when von Thunen created the von Thunen model, there was no electricity. There was no nuclear power. There's no gasoline. A lot of our energy came from burning firewood. So the forest ring is going to be the second ring out from the market center. Okay. The third ring, and remember, transporting lumber is pretty heavy. It would be pretty costly. It'd be a lot of trips on a horse and a wagon, right? Because you didn't have a car back then. So that's another reason they're going to be closer to the center. The third ring out is going to be grains and cereal crops. Those are lighter, easier to transport, but you do need a little bit more space to grow them. So you're going to want to use cheaper land to do that. And then the ranching and livestock, as we mentioned, are going to be on the most outer ring. Shout out to Cam Scanner. Made these screenshots with Cam Scanner. They're not today's sponsor, but if Cam Scanner is out there and wants to sponsor me, get in contact with me. brian.fishpine@gmail.com. All right. Let's talk about some ways in which agriculture alters the environment. We talked about shifting cultivation already. Sometimes that results in slash and burn farming. And unfortunately, that results in a lot in deforestation. So we're seeing land cover change. We're seeing how the earth is covered shifting as a result of that, which can have adverse effects on the environment. Another example is terracing. It looks really beautiful, but there's a lot of energy that's spent in making the landscape look like this. Irrigation is another interesting one that I was reading about over the weekend. We're starting to see, like you see in this GIF over here, we're starting to see places like this Aral Lake disappear and really become more of a desert, right? So that's where you see this boat in the middle of nowhere because over the last 50 years or so, this desert has almost completely disappeared. Another example is draining wetlands, draining swamps. Not trying to get political here, but that is altering the environment as we turn those spaces into spaces for agriculture. And then as a result of pastoral nomadism, we could have overgrazing as well, where landscapes are just not producing the grass for these animals to be able to feed and fertilize again. Okay. All right. What are the effects of all this? Pollution's an obvious one. Land cover change, which we talked about. Desertification, which we talked about, where places are becoming more and more desert-like. And soil salinization, where we're putting too much salt in our soil so that things can't grow effectively. Okay. Societal effects. People's choices are changing, right? When I was a little kid, I never heard of organic food. But now that's all the rage. That's what people want to eat. The role of women is changing as well. We're seeing more and more female farmers in developing countries. And as we mentioned, commercial farming has exploded in the last 100 years. So lots of farmers are getting into the game to try to make some money. Okay. Agricultural innovations like biotechnology, GMOs, aquaculture, when we're farming our fish, have led to lots of debates over things like sustainability, how we're using our soil, how we're using our water. Are we ruining biodiversity? And are we using too much fertilizer, too many pesticides? All right, let's get into some food choices. People's individual choices or collective choices are going to influence what we're going to grow. So some of these choices that people are making are things like urban farming. We're trying to do more farming in city landscapes, in urban areas. We have community-supported agriculture, where essentially instead of buying food, you might be buying steak in a small agricultural organization, and then you get a crate or a box or a bag every week or every couple of weeks or so that was grown by the farmer that you're supporting. Another example is organic farming, which we have mentioned. We have value-added products, all right? Some farmers have figured out that they could just grow stuff like strawberries or olives or, a bunch of other things like carrots. Or you could take those things that you've grown and you can try to extract a little bit more value out of them by like turning those berries into jam or pickling those olives and pickling those carrots so you can sell them as a more finished product. That's what we call value-added products, okay? We have fair trade products. So the example here is coffee that was made without exploiting workers, without negatively affecting the environment. Local food movements, trying to get your food from a local farmer. And then dietary shifts, like shifting towards a keto diet, cutting out things like breads and carbs and things that are typically not as good for you. This is a medical advice. Go. That's another AB class. So let's try to keep it geographic here. All right. Challenges of feeding a global population. We got food insecurity. Unfortunately, some countries on our planet are not food secure, where people go to bed at night without knowing where their next meal is going to come from. This map from the amazing Our World and Data website is from there. All right. We have food deserts, right? We'll zoom in a little bit from that map and you see places in urban areas that we call food deserts or food swamps, where people don't have access to fresh, healthy food. They might be surrounded by fast food. They might be surrounded by convenience stores like a 7-Eleven, but they don't have access to fresh, healthy food, and that has negative health outcomes. Adverse weather. We saw last month in Texas how that snowstorm completely disrupted a lot of things in the nation's second largest state, and food is one of those things. Okay, we saw lots of shortages in grocery stores. Even like we felt it here in San Diego. Some things weren't on the shelf because of that snowstorm. All right. And then suburbanization is another challenge as well. When I was growing up here in Chula Vista, this area called Otay Ranch looked like this. All right. It wasn't black and white, but there was a bunch of cows grazing this area. It was a very rural area. Today, very suburbanized. You got Otay Ranch High School over there. Lots and lots of new homes. But this is a challenge as well. All right. Economic impacts of food production. Where we choose to grow our food matters. How precise we are with our mechanization matters. And what the government does matters as well. Like this pie chart's showing us that what we subsidize is mainly cotton, wheat, corn, rice, and soy. They get 84% of subsidies from the American government. Look what's left out. Fruits and vegetables, less than 1%. And we wonder why Americans are not very healthy. And finally, women have started to play a much bigger role in agriculture in the world today, especially in developing countries, as gender roles are changing, as women assert more rights in legislatures, as they're able to do more things economically. We're starting to see them play a larger role in feeding our planet. All right. Well, that is it for Unit 5. We'll be back soon with our Unit 6 video. I'll link some useful things down below in the doobly-doo. Feel free to follow me on Instagram, coachfish_. Follow me on Twitter, also at coachfish_. Let me know what you want to see in future videos. Have a great rest of your day, geographers, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.